In the original Pikmin, there was only one true character, that being Captain Olimar. Since then, our beloved cast of characters has grown exponentially, all the way until Pikmin 4, where...
Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?
Yeah, we got a whole lot of new faces in this game, didn't we? There are 50 castaways we're tasked with saving in this game, all of whom have distinct personalities, quirks, and designs. Today, I'm going to be ranking these characters from worst to best based on my own subjective criteria. I spent hours poring over all of their dialogue to come up with this list, and I didn't feel like this really fit in a larger Pikmin 4 analysis, so I decided to make it its own video. Without further ado, let's get started.
Barbone.
Oh, Frise. You could have been someone really special to the Pikmin community, but instead you made a mockery of all of our hopes and dreams. Frise is a talented, self-absorbed musical artist who tagged along with the TV crew to PNF 404 in search of a new, genuine musical inspiration. This is all well and good, but the only thing Frise has to offer us is the lineup trumpet after we collect every treasure in the Soulful Musician series. And while that might be a good reward on paper, letting us achieve precise control over our Pikmin, in practice, it's entirely pointless, as you can't even receive it until after completing Sublevel 2 of Cavern for a King.
Hazel.
Fox is the Pikmin series' take on the Silicon Valley Crypto Bro type.
Y'all keep hating while I kick off my week screening Scarface from my private movie theater in my New York City pied-à-terre. Remember, choose rich.
A certified douchebag who's not scared to talk about all of his accomplishments and business success while showing very little in the form of gratitude or humility. Fox acquired his enormous wealth by creating and selling IT startups. His motto, according to the game, is "Be the first to jump ship," which implies that there are others that Fox himself threw under the bus to achieve the level of success he has. Despite his enormous wealth, he worries about how much his rescue will cost, and as the rotten cherry on top of all these other despicable qualities, he doesn't even like Ochi. As a personal slight to me, he even drinks his coffee super sweet, with 2 milks and 3 sugars. If he really was a hard worker, as he claims, he'd drink his coffee black.
Oi.
Kingsley's a little bit of a weirdo who's obsessed with flowers. This makes sense given his profession as a florist back on his home planet, but he takes it to a whole new level. Most of Kingsley's dialogue has him expositing about the intricacies of glow Pikmin, but he offers nothing new or substantial. The real reason he's all the way down here is because of the comments he makes when Ochi talks to him with a leafified tail. He wants to sniff the literal bottom of our dog and heavily insists on it, with his exact dialogue being, "Please? Can I? I gotta. Just one sniff." Absolute unhinged oddball behavior. Someone please lock this man up. Ochi does not feel safe with him here. Twyla is a geologist who hates dirt. Yeah, Twyla, I hate to break it to you, but there's a lot of dirt on this planet. On top of the fact that her career seems ill-suited for her, she expresses distaste in even talking about her profession with another young, geologically inclined castaway. And she's one of the only castaways who, now that she's been saved, wants to leave the planet altogether. And I say, let her go. She's not bringing anything to the table. Twyla gets a bit of a redemption with some of the outlooks on her work and the way she treats others, but it's not enough to save her in this ranking.
No.
Bernice is a fortune teller who lacks any credibility outside of her ID card's description that claims her predictions occasionally come true.
He's washing a bag of Doritos with soap. Yes, and you are screaming at him. You're crying, you're screaming, that's not enough soap!
To me, Bernice reads as delusional, and despite some interesting dialogue describing the will of the galaxy and her visions, she offers no real substance to the player or Ochi. She does, however, imply the existence of canine fortune tellers in the Pikmin universe, which I guess is something? It's a mysteria!
Holy die!
Muggs is a famous reporter with the Space Broadcast Incorporated TV crew who came to PNF 404, and she doesn't leave too much of an impression. It's cute how she interviews Ochi, but compared to a lot of the other characters, she didn't have too much unique dialogue, most commonly commenting, "That's a wrap," at least once all the TV crew is put back together. It is worth noting that our lab tech Russ has a crush on her, although it doesn't provide any of the fun interactions like you'd hope, just kind of a background detail. Overall, kind of forgettable. Kaze is the assistant to Talbo Real Estate's President Chowder, who we'll meet later in the video. Think of Kaze as the Pikmin universe's version of Kenneth from 30 Rock or Dwight from The Office. Kay speaks highly of his boss Chowder, and comments mostly about how much he admires him and the responsibilities that come with being the assistant to a man as great as he. He offers to sell the player some property on the home planet of Carrot that has an easy commuting line, which is a pretty neat interaction, but all in all, Kays doesn't let us in to see what he's truly all about, and that's a bit disappointing. Lappy's a painter, except he forgot all his paint supplies at home. So what does Lappy do? Well, he just talks about how much of a prodigy he is and that he's mentally taking note of all the things he wants to paint for later. There's a mention of him using a type of stone to draw on the SS Shepherd, but apparently he was forced to wash it off as it doesn't show up in game anywhere. Hey Lappy, I happen to collect a bunch of art materials that I don't have any use for. Feel free to take some if you're bored of just standing around all day. Ren is a member of the research task force who isn't a researcher at all, but rather a true blue chef.
Welcome to our shitty restaurant, where the only thing worse than the ambiance is the food.
Ren won a cooking show back on his home planet, and his talent was so attractive to task force leader Chet, he was asked to join the group as their chef. Ren is looking forward to discovering all the new flavorful ingredients on PNF 404. But unfortunately for Ren, there just so happens to be another castaway who has a little bit more experience with the planet's fine dining scene. Sai is the youngest member of the task force, a real smartest kid in school type. Sai is most prominently interested in the relationship between Pikmin and sound, hypothesizing that different sounds would be able to get the Pikmin to do different things. We see this directly in-game by using the idler alert, homesick signal, lineup trumpet, and our plain old-fashioned captain's whistle. Sai's a cute design for sure, but serves mostly as exposition for the Pikmin and their sonically inclined behavior. Something about Vonda intimidates me. I think it's the cat eyes combined with the bright red bowl cut, but it could also be her status as a super prestigious opera singer. Vonda put together the TV crew to survey PNF 404 for its music, with her goal being to host her next concert right here on the Pikmin planet. She thinks she's losing her hearing, and she enjoys the tune hummed by our one and only Captain Olimar, and for that, she gets some points, but that alone won't be able to save her from this spot. Osa's an archaeologist who, like many of the castaways in Pikmin 4, came to the Pikmin planet for academic purposes. Osa rewards the player with materials for building structures, but, we use the materials to build the structures in the first place, so we're really just going around in circles here, aren't we, Osa? He's got an interest in the previous civilization on PNF 404, but nothing for lore enthusiasts to really sink their teeth into. He's got one cool line about how when you're inspired, just throw away all logic and reason and go for it, which I think is pretty neat. But all in all, Osa's just a basic dude who loves raw materials and archaeology. Dash is a straight-up Nepo baby, plain and simple.
Spoiled, rich kids on Snapchat, they post whatever they want because they're rich.
Dash is obsessed with caves and uses his family's generational wealth to go on expeditions to some of the most interesting places in the universe. Yeah, that went really well for you here on PNF 404, didn't it, Dash? Dash is the first leafling you rescue from a Dandori battle, and becomes a true blue cave connoisseur after he sets up at the Rescue Corps' base camp. He rewards the player for exploring caves with raw materials, but knowing where he comes from and the fact I was going to explore these caves anyway, really make it feel like Dash used the Rescue Corps as some type of charity. Which, okay, I guess technically it is, so yeah, I'll take those raw materials, thank you very much. I decided to lump Quiche, Kaya, and Sheba all together here, as they compose the entirety of the Planetary Science Club. Sheba's the stargazing, no-nonsense club leader, Kaya's the head in the clouds easygoing type, and Quiche is the academic one interested in geological surveying. These three high school girls won a raffle that allowed them to take a trip to the newly discovered PNF 404. Of course, we know that went horribly wrong, as they were all separated after entering the planet's atmosphere and surviving their crash landing. Sheba, of course, wishes they never won that raffle in the first place, but we have to look on the bright side. Nothing strengthens the bonds of friendship like a shared trauma. Am I right, girls? We got on Kingsley's case for his obsession with flowers, but Francois is not too much better. One of the earlier castaways you rescue, the most notable part about Francois is his dream. Francois dreams of a mutual understanding with plant life, meaning that not only does he want to understand the plants, but his dream is for the plants to understand him. Completely whacked out dude. And just like Kingsley, Francois is also obsessed with glow Pikmin, and he's used by the game as a means to talk more about them and how cool they are. He's a bit forgettable outside of his dream, but he'll be around giving you materials throughout the majority of your playthrough as long as you keep on growing more Pikmin. If Kays has taught us anything, it's that Chowder is the kingpin of interplanetary real estate. And yeah, I guess that hits the nail right on the head, doesn't it? Chowder exposits to the player about his exploits and deals he's made across the galaxy, even cueing the player in on how he'd utilize all of the areas discovered in the game. From using the sandy real estate of the Serene Shores as foundation for a resort settlement, or the plots of land he's already scoped out in the Sun-Speckled Terrace, Chowder works fast, and he works hard. It's worth noting that while Kays refers to himself as Chowder's assistant, Chowder specifically calls him his secretary. While in practice, these two titles really could be no different from each other, it really cements the two as boss and lackey in my eyes. Alright, what if we took Brittany from Pikmin 3, put her into Photoshop, and just stretched her out a little bit? Yeah, well then you've got Nell, who's actually a really pivotal NPC to the overall plot of the game. Nell is a veterinarian who's one of the very last castaways you rescue in-game. Her major contributions to the plot include being abducted by Louie, and eventually curing Ochi from his leafification. I've got a bit of a distaste for how dirty the Copiot captains are done in Pikmin 4, as all three of them have knockoff versions that replicate their designs for better and worse. Personally, I think Nell already had some rough material to work with by just being related to Brittany, and this design is just not doing her any favors in my book. Nell isn't all that bad, but certainly a bit more forgettable than her other two Copiot counterparts. Corgwin is a leafling who you rescue from the blossoming Arcadia's Dandori battle. This gives the player the ability to replay any of the Dandori battles up to that point directly from the base camp, but that's not really why he's as high up as he is. Unlike Chowder or Fox, who have numerous income streams and own large-scale corporations, Corgwin is a solo act in his contracting and development work. He plans on building homes at the spot of the Rescue Corps' base, and he wants to make sure they're up to standard, as he hates disappointing his customers. Corgwin's just a hard-working, Dandori-loving, blue-collar worker who wants the best for everyone, and for that, he's alright in my book. Now here's a guy I'm sure plenty of you can empathize with. Boris is a famous author who's come to the Pikmin planet for inspiration. After the success of his first book, he's been feeling pressured by his editor and fans to come out with something special for his second. The only problem is that those creative juices aren't quite flowing. Experiencing heavy writer's block and suffering nightmares about his own editor, Boris couldn't catch a break before, and then he went and got turned into a leafling. I'm sure that experience will be more than enough to charge up Boris's writing by the time he finishes his second book. Similar to Boris is the final member and director of the Space Broadcast Incorporated television crew, Wolfgang, who came to PNF 404 for good footage and good ratings. Wolfgang is the second most content-pilled castaway we'll find here, and right now he's feeling like he's in a bit of a rut. He's constantly workshopping and pitching various TV shows, including one called Bulbor Breakfast Battle, which he feels our character would be good in. Wolfgang here seemingly doesn't care about the safety of his stars as long as the content itself is gripping. That's not necessarily the right approach, but what Wolfgang is right about is the fact that Ochi definitely has what it takes to be a superstar. Chewy is the leader of the tourist group from Satella Travel, who's come to PNF 404 for a variety of reasons. Chewy's business savvy, career focused, and always looking for a good deal. One of the most notable things about Chewy is that while at the rescue command post, she spends her time walking around and checking up on all the Satella Travel tourists, which is definitely nice to see her doing her job, as the whole tour was organized by Chewy in the first place to save Satella Travel from bankruptcy. I don't know why so many companies in the Pikmin universe are at the brink of bankruptcy, but characters like Chewy are doing what they can to save the intergalactic economy overall. Now it's time for the lowest ranking member of the Rescue Corps, but arguably one of the most important of the story and progression of Pikmin 4. Yanni is a little weird.
Let's get a baseline pulse here.
Yeah.
It's starting to race a little bit.
Sure.
But you're just
Is that typical?
You're just choking.
So sorry.
No, you just feel for the pulse.
All right.
You've been with me for a long time, but
It's there.
okay. He's very good.
I can
Very
tell.
inexpensive.
Yanni's the doctor for the Rescue Corps, who assists the player during night missions and uses the glow sap to develop a cure for the leafification undergone by many of the characters throughout the game. While super practical for the purposes of the Rescue Corps, Yanni is a bit of a quack doctor, often likened to a mad scientist in the way he'll even use his fellow Corps members to test out various medicines and concoctions. He likes to harass the player about the number of glow Pikmin created during night missions. Like, yes, I know, I'm getting the star bits, right? I'm worried too, okay? He also said this one very weird line about starting some type of breeding program, so yeah, Yanni's a little odd. A treasure appraiser through and through, Schnauz could probably sell you anything he put his mind to. Schnauz is the one who appraises the treasure the player collects and offers insight into the various things we round up during our excursion on PNF 404 through the treasure catalog. Schnauz has more written dialogue than almost any other castaway in the game, based solely on the notes he provides for each treasure, which is a nice touch, as previously we've only relied on the ship or Olimar's perspective on treasure. Schnauz is a true professional in this sense, and much appreciated by me. Halfway through our ranking, Molly's here to remind you to both like this video and subscribe to the channel. See, Molly is a streamer and came to PNF 404 with the Satella Travel Tourist Group in order to get some fresh new content for her stream. As someone who has previously exploited the Pikmin planet and its inhabitants for views, Molly hits a little too close to home for me. Although, when it comes to our content, Molly claims she started getting really big by pouring water on herself and blowing up an unmanned rocket? Molly definitely pops as a castaway, and has a lot more personality than many of the others, even having a bit of a crush on Russ, our lab tech. Could this be the beginning of a passionate love triangle between Russ, Molly, and Muggs? I don't know, but to me, that sounds like content. Chet is the leader of the Research Task Force, sent to investigate PNF 404 by the Interstellar Federation. Interstellar Federation? We're back. We're so back. Despite not being a researcher himself, Chet is held in high regard by so many of the task force members, and it's easy to see why. I mean, just look at this man. Truly a peak specimen. Chet is laid back, humble, and all in all a pretty good dude. Honestly, Chet is fairly bland compared to some of the other castaways, but I love him solely for the fact he looks like if the captain I made for my first playthrough decided to sell out and go corporate. And for that, I like him a lot. Petunia is fairly unassuming, but definitely has a striking design. I don't know what it is, but all the big body castaways exude this type of aura I cannot describe for the life of me. Petunia is a research task force recruit who's researching the onions and offers actually a lot of insight into the relationship between Pikmin and onions overall, hypothesizing the onions function as a biocrafter, each one carrying the blueprints of a specific Pikmin type. This is interesting and all, but the real reason Petunia is high up is because of the dialogue she gives you if you approach her with an appearance identical to hers by using the character customizer. As it turns out, Petunia herself was created by a biocrafter, making her the first and only example of an artificially created castaway in the Pikmin series. This opens up a ton of ideas and possibilities for the Pikmin universe and lore enthusiasts, so I'm inclined to rank her rather highly.
Oh, Mom!
Oh, Dingo. You do not leave a very good first impression, do you? From abandoning Bernard in his time of need to begrudgingly congratulating the player upon rescuing every castaway, Dingo doesn't have the most agreeable countenance of the Rescue Corps bunch. He's meticulous and a little dishonest, as well as has a tendency to eat anything he just finds lying around, much to the dismay of his coworkers. Still though, at the end of the day, he is a coworker, and does what's best for everyone. Dingo gets some serious points for being the "I can't do this level" button Nintendo's had a habit of shoving into their games as of late. And while of course I've never used him, he does cut the speedrun down by an insane amount of time, and for that, Dingo has earned his Dandori stripes in my eyes. Como is a rather unassuming castaway, and one you might not have expected so high up. Como's an eco-hydrologist, which, yes, apparently is a real title, and has come to PNF 404 with the task force to study the water and soil quality of the planet. Como's draw to me is her shyness and her claim that she's not exactly the most social and not great at conversation. I think it's nice how she's using the opportunity to break out of her comfort zone a little bit, befriending the player and other castaways, and trying to use the discoveries on PNF 404 to improve the quality of life on her own home planet, which apparently isn't very good. Also, it's really cute how she mentions that she wouldn't be nervous around an animal like Ochi, unlike how she acts around other people. Someone get this girl an emotional support animal stat. You know him. You might not love him. Folks, it is Alf. Wait, actually, I'm just receiving word that this is not Alf, but in fact Alf's older brother Yorkie. Yorkie is the engineer of the Copiot crew who are exploring PNF 404 in Pikmin 4, and is the oldest of 15 whole siblings. Yorkie is known for sending a lot of money home, his love of spicy grilled fruit, and his interest in customizing spaceships. Yorkie ultimately upgrades the SS Shepherd's radar to allow the player to explore the final area of the Primordial Thicket, which offers some of the best fan-servicey content in the game. I mean, just look at these jiggle physics. All of this is because of Yorkie, and for all that, he's definitely impressed me compared to his horrible pilot of a younger brother. The scientists of the Rescue Corps, Russ is probably the member who's going to be actively helping you out the most throughout the game, allowing you to repurpose the raw material you collect into a multitude of different things. Russ is in charge of upgrading the player and Ochi's arsenal, and develops many things over the course of the campaign. Truly, it cannot be understated the talent that this guy has. I mean, he practically plays God with everything he can create from raw materials. This includes landmines, carrots, and straight up lightning blasts. Russ has this whole Professor Egad vibe about him, but honestly, he's way more helpful than Egad ever was. Try going a whole playthrough without talking to Russ once, and you'll realize by Cavern for a King just how important all of the gizmos and gadgets Russ whips up are if you don't have them. Mika has got to be one of the most misunderstood castaways of the entire bunch, and it's so easy to see why. Mika is the adult supervisor of the Planetary Science Club, which of course consists of Quiche, Kaya, and Sheba, who end up having to fend for their lives on the planet after crash landing. So it can be assumed that Mika, as supervisor, didn't do her job in the first place, right? Well, yeah, kinda, but it's not so simple. Mika's a first-year teacher who was invited by the students to be their chaperone as a type of olive branch, as she lacks the confidence in her own teaching ability. Unlike the students who get their tickets from a raffle, Mika has to pay out of her own pocket to even allow the students to go. After this, during the students' recount of the crash, they let us know Mika did everything she could in the situation to save the students first, staying behind as they executed emergency protocol. I, for one, would like to formally apologize to Miss Mika for wrongly comparing her to Miss Frizzle. A high school teacher? You're Miss Frizzle?
Seatbelts, everyone!
As this field trip was one that Mika definitely wasn't quite ready for.
Mural.
Kit likes minerals. He also says really cool things like poppin' pumice when he gets excited. Okay, writing that one down. Kit is really good at what he does, able to infer that the material the player uses throughout the game is actually more akin to fossilized creature remains rather than an actual mineral. Kit scores some points for being one of the only NPCs in the game to be actively doing some type of work, as after being cured from his leafling state, he can be found at the edge of the Rescue Corps' base just digging around in the dirt. Some plain, good old-fashioned manual labor earns him some credit in my book, much better than all these other scientists who stand around doing nothing for weeks on end. Plus, he wants to scratch Ochi behind the ears, and who could blame him for that?
Cannonball.
Dalmo's the castaway who gives the player access to the new and improved Piclopedia, and for that, he deserves a medal for doing most of the legwork in documenting the wildlife of PNF 404 in Pikmin 4. Dalmo doesn't tell the player much about himself, but he's fascinated with the creatures on this planet, and offers a ton of insight into their behavior. The Piclopedia is a place I'm sure many people spend hours of their life in. I know I sure did when I was a youngin' playing Pikmin 2, and that entertainment wouldn't have been possible without Dalmo, so just for that, he ranks this highly. Santi is one of the only castaways who has a personal history with a member of the Rescue Corps, in this case being his eternal rivalry with Bernard. It's pretty funny how one-sided this rivalry is, as Bernard's accidental interventions into Santi's exploits have caused him to have to work as a cafe manager, a fortune teller, and screenwriter, all while hoping he doesn't have to encounter Bernard again. When Santi went to flight school to pursue being a pilot, who else would be his instructor but the prodigal pilot himself, Bernard? His latest gig is a part-time position for Satella Travel, so of course, he was destined to cross paths with Bernard once again. Which brings us to Bernard, who, let's face it, is not exactly what most of us expected when we were tasked with rescuing the pilot of the SS Shepherd. Bernard is a boisterous guy who's said to be the best pilot in the universe. He has a tendency to speak loudly while emphasizing a single word in his sentence, just like his rival Santi, which certainly adds a lot of personality to such a tiny body. He's like if Alf drank a potion that improved his piloting skills, his sunglasses game, and also his melanin levels. You get Bernard substantially later than the rest of the Rescue Corps members, so you don't have as much time with him, but the time you do have with him is well spent in fleshing out just how likable this little high-flying dude is. In his own words, Alpin is an interstellar high-speed communications business tycoon. He's always coming up with different business ventures and seemingly has found great success. Unlike Chowder, whose only real assistant is his secretary Kays, Alpin has worked with venture capitalist Fox on multiple projects, most recently his company E-Leader, which he's the CEO of. Despite definitely being a member of the Pikmin universe's 1%, as it turns out, Alpin is the one who makes Fox his super sweet coffee for him, so really he's more like one of us than he looks. Alpin's grateful to the player for saving them and plans on drilling for hot springs and building houses here on PNF 404. He also has a twin brother who we'll be seeing just a little bit later in the video. I don't know why I rated Fox so low and Alpin so high, just something about his energy made me feel like he really earned everything he worked for, and for that, he's definitely in the upper half of Castaways for me. Grace is not all there, and that definitely shows in her dialogue. See, Grace has an obsession with the great empty blackness of space, and fancies floating in it without a care in the world. Seemingly, this is just the way she lives her life, but eventually, she was ripped out of orbit by PNF 404's gravity, and turned into a leafling. Grace doesn't like gravity very much, and only feels at peace in the weightlessness of space. Is this heaviness I feel gravity? Or do I just miss the sky? Bars! That goes hard. I love how Grace is basically the Pikmin universe's equivalent of a burnout, and her ramblings of space and floating really make it sound like instead of Pikmin, she discovered an entirely different kind of plant, if you catch my drift. Bonus points to Grace for being wanted by the Intergalactic Police. She really is living that life, and I gotta give it up for her. There isn't too much to say about Puddle outside of the fact that as the only stylist on the planet, he's responsible for making our character look however we want at any given moment. Supposedly, Puddle's so good at massages that he can massage a person's face to look completely different from how it did before. On top of this, Puddle lets the player cosplay as a leafling, and as a giant fan of how the leaflings look, I have to say that this is just super cool. Puddle won't tell us exactly why he became a stylist, and wants to hold on to that for himself. But one thing is for sure, he definitely picked the right career path, unlike some of the other castaways. Sammy's a castaway whose existence reminds us to be grateful for what we have. See, Sammy is the only castaway who comes from the planet Okubo. Okubo is said to experience practically never-ending hail and rain, which has forced its inhabitants to develop new infrastructure above water, as the planet's surface is now entirely ocean. On top of this, Okubo only gets a single day of sun during its entire year, so when Sammy, a scientist from Okubo, came to PNF 404, he was delighted to see how beautiful it ended up being year-round. Sammy's grateful for the good weather and blue skies, and reminds us that despite the adversity he faced on the Pikmin planet, at the end of the day, it's all about the little things in life. You might know Colin as the Rescue Corps officer whose face pops up on screen every 1 to 2 minutes. Colin's an interesting case as despite being the face of tutorials in Pikmin 4, and rightfully disdained for being so, he's also basically the straight man of the bunch, calling out crew members on their nonsense and keeping everyone in line with what their responsibilities are. Frankly, Colin runs a tight ship from the moment we first rescue him, and he spends the whole game with us, strategizing and giving the player tips and lessons. In the context of us being a new recruit and not a seasoned Pikmin veteran, Colin does his job really, really well. And for that, I've got to give it up to him. I mean, just look at this pose. He is stunting on all his doubters and straight up getting the job done. Can't hate him for that, I guess. Plus, as an added bonus, Colin's one of the few castaways that's actually playable, being available as a captain for Dandori battles, which is pretty cool. Jin embodies exactly what the Pikmin series is all about. Overcoming obstacles, trial and error, and most of all, Dandori. Jin, once rescued, gives the player the ability to retry any of the Dandori challenges they've attempted over the course of the game. This essentially acts as this game's mission mode, and is arguably the best in the entire franchise. Jin is a resilient adventurer who appreciates meditation and organization, and came to the Pikmin planet in search of a new set of challenges. He claims no new worlds had been discovered since he was born, so of course, once the existence of PNF 404 hit the mainstream, he just had to drop everything and come here, and for that, I'm thankful for him. Don Bergman, the legendary Kopayat treasure hunter. You know, at first I thought Don Bergman was the first character introduced with a last name, but that honor actually goes to our very own Captain Irma Shepard. Don Bergman is a treasure hunter traveling PNF 404 with his Kopayat team of Yorkie and Nell. He plans to use the funds earned from his haul to hopefully help mitigate the food crisis on his home planet of Kopay. Apparently, Kopayats are not only picky eaters, but the concept of agriculture just straight up hadn't existed for them. Don Bergman ponders if this is something that would be introduced to the planet, and considering the plot of Pikmin 3, yeah, that seems like it would be a good idea. Don Bergman earned some points because of the scar he got on his forehead from his rangering companion Ducky, and because he lets Ochi know that he'll be his friend for life, which is just special. There are truly no words to describe Patch, but if I had to come up with one, it's pragmatic. Patch sees life as a giant game full of players and losers, and he's willing to bet it all during his excursion on PNF 404. There's an ongoing battle happening between you and this planet. A long haul fight can make it hard to stay focused. Patch is strategic. Patch is determined. The way Patch is talking is the way that streamers should talk. Patch is an unemployed gambler who gains respect for the player after being saved and cured from his leafling state. If you put too much on your plate without knowing your limits, you will end up having a meltdown. Things will start slipping through your fingers and you'll fall apart. Oh my god. There's just something so strange about the hyper-strategic and literal way that Patch views the world, so much so that he's fascinating compared to a lot of the other more down-to-earth and realistic characters. Patch tells the player to show no mercy in challenge, and lets them know that underneath Olimar's ordinary exterior, there's a darkness that could only be fostered by truly experiencing life or death situations. For respecting the undisputed GOAT and offering a number of hilarious out-of-pocket lines, Patch is definitely one of my favorite newcomers to the franchise, one I'd like to see in the future. Starting our top 5 is Horatio. No, really. Horatio's a proud member of the gig economy. Just a fancy sounding term that lets us know he's terminally unemployed.
Get a job? Yeah. Just get a job? Why don't I strap on my job helmet and squeeze down into a job cannon and fire off into jobland, where jobs grow on jobbies?
Horatio wants to make people happy, but simultaneously doesn't exactly know how to do that. So what does he do? That's right, he laughs like Wario and strikes a pose with a thumbs up, letting you know it's all gonna be okay. Horatio's kind of philosophical and isn't very materialistic, but mostly he's ranked this highly because of his design and very silly way of interacting with the player. I don't know, something about this guy just clicked with me. He might not be the most interesting Castaway, but one of the notes I wrote in preparation for this video was, I like this guy. So that's gotta count for something. Our very own Captain Irma Shepard is up next, and just like Colin, she'll be in your ear for a majority of the game. Despite being terrified of both the enemy creatures of PNF 404 and the Pikmin themselves, Shepard's able to pull her team together and take on the monumental task of saving everyone from the clutches of PNF 404. As the 99th captain of the Rescue Corps, Shepard has some pretty big shoes to fill, and this anxiety to do well permeates her character and voyage log throughout the entire game. There's something really nice knowing that even though she might not be the most capable herself, she's able to direct and rely on others to form a really cohesive team by the end of the playthrough. Plus, like Colin, she's also playable in Dandori battles. She gets some extra points for being the one who first trained Ochi, and since Ochi's an absolute unit in this game, I'd say she did a pretty good job, all things considered. Alpin's twin Bo finally makes an appearance on this list, all the way up at number 3, and for plenty of good reasons. Bo is a method actor who, once given a role, does everything he can to prepare for it. Recently, Bo landed a role where he has to be a castaway, and to prepare for it, it's implied he purposely shipwrecked himself here to hone his craft. Bo has previously played a cheerful yet sprightly plumber, an adventurer who can ingest anything, and a hero with a traumatic past, all thinly veiled references to Mario, Kirby, and Link respectively. However, Bo is most famous for his role in the Carrot Planet franchise. He goes on to describe the plots of Carrot Planet 2, and Carrot Planet 3, which of course are all basically identical to the plots of the first 3 entries in the Pikmin franchise. Bo is super memorable, and really lets us appreciate just how far Pikmin has come, as one of Nintendo's smaller IPs. What is there to be said about Louie that hasn't been said before? The deuteragonist of Pikmin 2, Louie proves to be just as much trouble for the player in this game as in Pikmin 3, if not exponentially more so. Where's the dog? Tell us! Louie's definitely the antagonist of Pikmin 4's post-game, and his antics cause the player an unbelievable headache. Still though, Louie has that charismatic X factor that people work for their entire lives. Louie, however, was just born with it. If we start to power scale the Pikmin universe, Louie's the biggest anomaly, being able to solo and in some cases completely take over every single creature on the Pikmin planet, outside of the Scornet Maestro and the Quaggled Myreclops, I guess, but I think Pikmin 3 needed to nerf this man for the plot to, actually happen. Upon rescue, Louie provides the player with 2 different forms of entertainment, the first of which being his notes in the Piklopedia. Unlike Olimar and Dalmo's more practical notes, Louie uses the opportunity to write his own cookbook, providing his tips and tricks on how to make the best meal out of every creature on the planet. This includes absolutely insane feats like boiling a horned cannon beetle, smoking smoky prog eggs, and stewing mammoth snoot whackers. The second way Louie entertains the player is through his quest. After gathering select ingredients for Louie, he awards the player the extra hand, allowing them to carry objects just like a Pikmin would. This is a hilarious little detail and is perfect as an upgrade from Louie. And unlike Swarm, which was a missing feature, Extra Hand just feels right as a reward from this chaotic castaway. The man, the myth, the legend. Of course, the top spot had to go to the one and only Captain Olimar. Olimar serves as the primary antagonist for the main game, but he's not exactly evil as a leafling. After being leafified, Olimar runs around finding other castaways in danger, converting them into leaflings, allowing them to survive on the Pikmin planet, which otherwise has an atmosphere poisonous to them should their life support fail. There's something to be said about his efforts, as if he hadn't converted many of these castaways in the first place, they might not have been able to be saved by the Rescue Corps. The real number one reason why Olimar is the best castaway is because after curing him, he offers the player the ability to look back on his initial journey on the planet through Olimar's shipwreck tale, essentially allowing the player to play a whole new remixed campaign akin to Pikmin 1. This is another piece of side content that is just so dense and really shows how much work was put into making Pikmin 4 the best game possible for longtime Pikmin fans. So that was it. A deep dive into the Castaways of Pikmin 4 probably wasn't what you were expecting next from me, but there's just so much detail in all their dialogue, it would be a shame for me to not talk about them. Having recently replayed through all of Pikmin 4, I was surprised how much I missed from these characters, and honestly, there's a bunch of little details I wasn't able to include for this video. If you're interested in these guys, boot up the game yourself and strike up a conversation, and who knows, you might just leave with a better understanding of the Pikmin world. Or maybe not. Regardless, if you want to make your own tier list, link is in the description. Thanks again for watching. Till next time.